Hello and welcome to jetNEXUS tutorials for fast, scalable and resilient applications. In this video I'm going to show you some of the new cool stuff we've been working on in version 4.11, which was released earlier in February. So we've put in around about 17 new features, 15 improvements plus many more customer fixes. So let's begin. Okay, so the first thing you notice when going to the ALBX this time is a cool new logon page with our nice logo there. Before it was just the browser logon box. Now we've got this forms-based logon page. And what that's allowed us to do is add a new feature in the top right hand corner of the IP services. You can see log off. And this has also become more important now because we can create multiple users. So whereas before we could only create the admin user or the admin user was already created, now we've added within configure users the ability to create different users and give them different access rights. So you can see the old admin user, and that's both a local user and a cluster user. Here we just click add a user, and I'm going to add myself as a user. And I can either give myself admin rights or I can give myself the following group memberships as well. Probably the most interesting one I'm just going to do is give myself, instead of admin, I'm going to change that to GUI read, which means that I can only read the config. I can't write anything to the config. So I can access the GUI, but I can't make any changes. So if I update that on box 1, which is 10.4.9.11, you can see the group membership there and the user's been created successfully, and it's a cluster user, so that will be transferred across to my passive box, which is 10.4.9.12. So now I should be able to sign into that box with the username Gary Christie, put in the password that I filled in box 1, click login, and now I can view everything within the user interface. But what I can't do is make any changes to that user interface. So if I just try to change a service name, for example, once I click update, I should get a warning at the bottom saying access is denied. So I click update, yep, access is denied, please see your administrator. And if we look at the users on there, we can see the users being transferred across, and it's only GUI read only. So see your administrator, well, we're signed on to box 1 as the administrator, so 10.4.9.11, and therefore we can make a change, and that change will be transferred across to box 2, the passive box. And another feature we can look at as part of the users is we can remove a user, and because that user was signed into box 2, what that will do is log us automatically out of that box. So there we go. We're logged out of box 2, 10.4.9.12. And if we try and sign in with that old username, it should say that your username or password is invalid, which it does at the bottom. So I'm just going to add myself back in again. I'll just put in the password, and this time I'm going to give myself GUI read write, and with a clever bit of editing I'm just going to log straight back onto box 2 already with my username, with the read write username and password now. So now I can edit with signing on as Gary Christie, and that edit will be reflected back on box 1, so we can probably see that going through. There we go. So it's fairly quick to transfer that edit across, and we saw that was in a matter of seconds. So what I also want to introduce you to as well, with the advent of multiple users, now we've added an audit log so we can see the changes that each user is making. So you can see most of these changes here are being made by admin, username admin, and you can see the section. So user Gary Christie set groups in jetNEXUS conf for cluster, and you can see the action, whether it's a success or a failure, and also the date and time in there. So why don't we make some changes, and therefore we'll see those changes happen in the audit log. So I'm just adding a test admin, add a password in there, and we'll give that admin user rights as well. This time we're going to log off, and instead of logging on as admin or Gary Christie, we're going to log on as test admin, and then make a few changes and see what happens to the audit log. So there's test admin as the cluster user. Let's make a few changes. So we'll change this to be blank. So it's gone from a particular config to be blank, and then we're going to take a service. We're going to disable a service or take a service offline. So we go back to the audit log now. It should take a couple of seconds, and then that should refresh. And then we can see there username test admin. If we double click, we get more information. So we can see there the service description has changed to service description equals blank. And also double click on here, we can see enabled equals 1 changed to enabled equals 0. So that's this one here. So let's move on to another feature we've added. If you go to the setup hardware page, what you'll see, you've got a visual guide of the status of each adapter or interface now. So you can see ETH0, it's there, but the adapter's down, so it's blue. We've got some bonded interfaces. We've gone for ETH 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and only 1, 2, and 3 we can see are up on there. So we can see that 4 and 5 are unplugged. The cable's basically not plugged in. And if we look at the appliance page, you can see we've got a new column called gateway. So this allows you to set a gateway per subnet or per interface. So let's do another interface. Let's create ETH0 with an IP address 10.4.8.11, same subnet mask, so class C subnet mask /24, and we'll add a gateway for that subnet as well. And what this means is we can now exist in more complex environments, and you don't have to set up static routes. So it will automatically route the unknown client IP addresses back out the correct gateway. So if, for example, there was a virtual IP address on 10.4.8.0 subnet, and it arrived through ETH0, we would route it back out to the gateway of ETH0. Whereas before we would have had to put a static IP address, and if it's an unknown IP address, that would be quite onerous and difficult to do. So now we've configured ETH0, we'll notice that it's moved from a state of adapter down and blue to adapter up and green. So in one fell swoop you get a visual status there, and you've also got policy routing set up for more complex environments. Bear in mind you've still got the default gateway set up there, and that's for anything that initiates from within the LBX, so predominantly for health checks. So you might still have to do static routes for those if you want to send them out particular interfaces. Okay, so let's look at IP services and show you the new virtual service status light, also present in the monitor status page. So you can see the status of individual virtual services, as well as still see the virtual IP address status. And one good way to view that is via SNMP, so I'm just making sure it's enabled. So we've made SNMP, or we've given SNMP the ability to query that virtual service status and that real server status. So I'm just going to open up one of my boxes. So we've got the ability to do an SNMP walk. We're SNMP walking to ourselves really, but we're putting in a particular OID that you can get from going to www.jetnexus.com/user central, and if you go to the user guide, there's an SNMP section there. But here we can see, you can see the service said it needs attention, then the next one was connected and the other one was offline, and that's exactly what you saw when you queried that OID within SNMP. So let's have a look at that again. You can see the service needs attention, online and offline. what we can also do is just change one value to change the OID to look at the real server status. And we can see the top one is connected, and then another one is real server unreachable, which is reflected in the GUI on the left hand side there. So I'm just going to put this one back online by putting in a port that is reachable on. And then look at that change which is reflected. We could see it says real server unreachable, and if we do that again it should say now connected. So it's 1.2, the second one down. So it was real server unreachable. Now it should be connected or online. So we'll do an up arrow and then we see it says now connected. So a nice feature that was requested by one of our customers was the ability to save the layout of the status page. And this includes resizing some of the columns or actually removing some of the columns. So if we look at that, we just resized one, we closed it down and we open it up and it's still there, it's resized. What we can do is let's remove we don't seem to have any compression values, so let's remove that column. And then we'll save that layout. So we just untick that compression column, save the layout. Let's close it down just to make sure that it's saved, just to demonstrate that it has saved, and we can see it's still gone. But if you forget and you come back to it after a while, you can always click default layout and the compression column's back again. Okay, and also new in version 4.1.1. There are a lot more settings that you can adjust on a per service basis, and this is in the advanced tab on the real service section. So one of those settings is connection timeout. 600 seconds for a web session is probably too long, that's 10 minutes, so we want to change that to something like 60 or 90 seconds. We'll change that to 60. If this was an RDP connection or service, then we might change that to an hour or 2 hours or 8 hours depending on your environment. What we also have is these monitoring intervals or monitoring timeouts or in and out count, and they're relevant to the server monitor that you select here. So a 200 OK we're going to select, which is a web health check, and we're going to change the interval to 10 seconds, so we'll only check every 10 seconds instead of every 1 second. And then monitoring timeout's fine. We'll change the in and out count to 5, meaning we have to pass 5 times before we bring it in, and we have to fail 5 times before we take it out of service. So all of those very useful, particularly on a per service basis, rather than the old global settings. So you also saw there some cipher options. So I'm going to create a new service, which is an SSL service, and then we're going to change the cipher options for that service, so we can also change the ciphers per service. Very, very useful if you want to set up different versions of ciphers for different clients or different browsers. A more secure service will have strong ciphers, and a less secure service but will allow more browsers will use the default settings. So let's create our service. We've created the virtual server side, we're just adding a real server in there. We're going to do an SSL offload just to make things simple, and then we just need to change the certificate. So we'll add a default certificate on there, and if we look down at the bottom, so scroll down to the bottom of the cipher options, you can see it just set to defaults. So what you can do is go to jetnexus.com/user central, go to the user guide, and down the bottom you can see the jetpacks, and you should be able to see in the global settings or cipher options some strong ciphers. So we're going to save that in there. It's a simple text file, so this is a jetpack to add the strong ciphers. And then once you've added that, you upload it as a jetpack. Say yes, it will update the cluster, so it will transfer that jetpack to all members of the cluster. And then we'll go back to IP services in the advanced section, and we should be able to see a strong cipher in there. Actually, just to prove that it transfers it across, we're going to do this from box 2. So we'll go down to our SSL service. We'll hit the advanced tab, and now we can see strong ciphers in there. So if we click update, that will apply strong ciphers to that SSL service. So there's a cool new way to look at what's happening on your box in a graphical format in the monitor history page. So here we're looking at the system database and we can see 3 metrics. We're going to untick the disk free so we can change the scale, and we can see the last 60 seconds worth of data, and that's because we've chosen the last minute there. We can choose hour, day, month and year. We can even look at the virtual services, and you notice the metrics have now changed, so you can choose different things. So let's choose a virtual service. The one that we know traffic's going to is handy, and we can see we've got, it defaults to 500, or it defaults to requests per second, and we can see 500 going through that virtual service. Even more interesting, we can choose which real server that we're interested in. For example, we might want to see the current connections to each server. And we can see 10.4.8.203 must have just been brought back online. And now they're load balancing evenly, and they've both got the same amount of current connections. So why don't we disrupt that a little bit, and we'll put 10.4.8.203 into drain mode. And because we've got keeper lives on the injector that's creating traffic for us, what you should see is that will dissipate fairly slowly. It won't be an instant change because some of those connections are keeper lived and are still going back to that same server. So here you can see 10.4.8.201 taking over all of the current connections and 10.4.8.203 dissipating naturally. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to the IP services section and our SSL service, and we should be able to see that we've only got one default certificate on the jetNEXUS appliance at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some more. We'll just call it test cert 1. I'm going to create 4 test certificates, and it doesn't really matter what the organization or the organizational unit is set to, so I can just cut and paste into there. And the reason why I'm creating many is just to simulate the ability to export and then re-import your certificates as a group. So we've created a new file format called JMBK, which is an encrypted file format. And this is really useful for customers that have a large number of SSL certificates and they wish to export them, to store them, and maybe to back up their configs as well. So here we can choose all. We can choose them one at a time if you want to, or we can just click all, give yourself a decent password and click export, and that will export to that JMBK file that I just mentioned, which is an encrypted jetNEXUS backup file. So let's encrypt that into one of our directories so we know where it is. What we're gonna do is delete those self-signed certificates off the box. Once we've exported, we can feel safe in deleting them. So I've deleted them all. If we go into our service again, we can see we've only got the delete certificate. Oh, sorry, we've only got the default certificate. And so we're going to go to the bottom section where we're going to import certificates from a JMBK. If you just got a PKCS12, you can use the top section as normal. So here we've found our SSL cert pack. We've given it the same password we used to export, and then we simply click import. And if we go to our manage certificates section now, what you should see is all 4 certificates have been put back on the box and they say brackets imported. Okay, so last couple of features I want to show you now. If we go to services date and time, you can see the current time zone is set to UTC. This was the global setting in previous versions, but now we can set a local time for each load balancer. And this is really important for troubleshooting because the logs would have been in UTC before, and you may have been in Chicago with a big time offset. So once you set this time, so once you set your local time, all things to do with the load balancer change to this local time, and that might be the licenses, that might be the logs, the syslogs in particular are really important, or the W3C logs too. So we're going to put this back to London. We just type in LON, find everything that contains LON. And as soon as we change it to Europe London, it changes the time back for us, which takes care of all of those things that I mentioned to do with the logs and the license and the W3Cs as well. And then last but no means least, we've added a new monitoring method, which is a multi-port TCP. This is really useful if you have a server that requires multiple ports for a service to work. So here we just giving it a description. We're going to choose the monitoring method of multi-port TCP, and then we can enter in the required content column the ports that we're interested in monitoring. And what's important about this, or what's important to know about this, is that all of those ports have to be present on the server that you wish to health check in order for it to pass that health check. So here I know we are running 80, 81, 82 and 83 on the server. On that 10.4.8.2.0.1. So I've got my health check there, and what I'm going to do is add in a port I know it's not running to see that monitor fail. So 667 is just a made up number by myself, and we should see, after I close a few things down just to tidy it up, that the real server monitor has failed, the virtual server status shows red, and the VIP status shows red. So to rectify that, I'm going to just take off a couple of ports. We know it runs 80, 81, 82 and 83, so it's going to pass with 80, 81 and 82. And there we go, it's passed. Thanks for watching, and don't forget you can access more of our videos from the links below.